Dana White dropping a huge announcement this morning with the UFC 308 card in Abu Dhabi this October. I feel like this is the fifth time I've said it this year, but a potential card of the year, maybe the most highly anticipated fight of the year with Max Holloway versus Ilia Topuria. Topuria making his first title defense after beating Alexander Volkanovski in January. This is the fight everybody wanted, right? It seemed like for a while they might give Volk a rematch. Then after UFC 300 with one of the best moments in UFC history with Max Holloway's knockout in the final second over Justin Gaethje, it was very clear this guy was next in line for the title shot. But that is not all. In the co-main event, Khamzat Chimaev makes his return to the octagon and they rebook him versus Robert Whittaker. This fight was supposed to take place in June. Khamzat Chimaev, the common cold got him once again, and he pulled out at the last minute. Ikram Aliskerov hopped in, and Robert Whittaker knocked his ass out inside 2 minutes. Right after the fight, it seemed like Robert Whittaker wanted nothing to do with rebooking the Khamzat fight, but here we have it anyway. You know, a lot of people said we were going to see a Strickland versus Whittaker #1 contender fight. But I guess, you know, Dana White privilege, they get Khamzat back in there. It's got to be very demoralizing when you go through a whole training camp for someone and then they pull out at the last minute, again, especially a guy like Khamzat, right, who's done that multiple times before.
Smash.
An absolute banger of a fight. One of the most highly anticipated fights of the year, no doubt, when they were booked in June. And I think most fans are very, very excited to finally get to see that one after getting canceled at the last minute. But we don't stop there. A couple more massive announcements, some very big high-level fights on this card. Ciryl Gane makes his long-awaited return. I guess they finally finished recording Garfield 2 or whatever movie this guy was in, fucking Jason Statham Jr. The guy's been getting a lot of hate recently for his inactivity, but here he is against Alexander Volkov. The guy has got a, NBA record at the All-Star break. The guy's fought a million times, and he's been in the UFC forever, but he's on a little bit of a run right now. I believe he's won 4 in a row. Again, the guy's been in the top 10 forever. Never really able to get over that hump. And this is a rematch. The first fight took place in 2021. Ciryl Gane 50-45'd him. I don't know how much Volkov has improved since then, but still a banger nonetheless. Volkov deserved a big fight. He's on a 4-fight win streak. Great fight. We are not done there, ladies and gentlemen. Magomed Ankalaev versus Alex Pereira. Nope, not even close.
Holy shit.
The guy has been calling for a title shot forever. And guess what, buddy? When you're a bum, when you're a crotch sniffer, they don't give it to him, unfortunately. Well, fortunately, because I don't want to see that fight. I do wonder what this means for Pereira, but a very exciting fight nonetheless versus Alexander Rakic. I was talking to anyone who would listen after UFC 300. I thought Rakic looked incredible in that fight. He was absolutely dominating Yuri before, Yuri turned up that samurai spirit using that dark magic that Pereira got him with a couple months later. Again, he was dominating the fight until he wasn't. I thought that was the best version of Alexander Rakic that we had seen in the UFC octagon. This was a guy who I thought had champ potential for a while, and we were just waiting for him to kind of fully reach that potential. And I thought it all came together for him versus Rakic. I said that a couple years ago when he was fighting Jan Blachowicz. He looked great in that fight until, he blew out his knee. He misses a couple years. And then he makes his return versus Yuri, and I thought he looked awesome in this fight. This guy's fast for that 205-pound division. Not only is he as big as possible, he might be the biggest guy in that weight class, but he's also so fast, man. His boxing, his kickboxing looked crisp in that fight. We've seen his takedowns in the past. We've seen that he has high-level wrestling. So this is a very, very interesting matchup versus Ankalaev, who, again, many think this guy is the best fighter in that 205-pound weight class and deserving of a title shot. But when you beat Johnny Walker, I'm not sure you deserve it. And when you're dealing with Alex Pereira, one of the biggest stars in the sport, they're going to try to keep him away from a stylistic matchup like Ankalaev, who, again, is not the biggest star. So another very interesting matchup. UFC 308, an absolute banger of a card. It feels like the 5th time this year I'm saying potential card of the year, but come on, man. Look at this main card. I am very excited for this one. Holloway versus Topuria. A little bit of a first look. I really don't know who's going to win this fight, man. I think it's, like I said earlier, as good of a fight as you could make in the UFC right now. Two of the most high-level pound-for-pound guys that we have. Max, an absolute legend, trying to get his belt back. And if he can do that, the conversations we're going to have about this guy, where he ranks all time, I think this would be a major, major stamp on an already super impressive resume. Speaking of, a stamp you could put on your resume, if Topuria beats this guy, if Topuria cracks this guy's chin, you're going to have back-to-back wins versus Alexander Volkanovski and Max Holloway, arguably the two best 45-pounders in the history of the UFC. Beating those guys in back-to-back fights in your first two, championship appearances. And the guy's still like 27, dude. I don't know what would be next for him, and I don't know, where you put this guy in the history of this division, but holy smokes, man. Are you kidding me? What a way to start your title run with wins over Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski. So a lot on the line in this one. Rob versus Khamzat. I picked Robert Whittaker a couple weeks ago, or I guess over a month ago at this point when they were scheduled to fight. His most recent sickness, how much that'll affect him, I think it's very hard to say, but it seems like when he's gotten sick in the past, he's still been able to return at full strength. So, hopefully we will see that again and we will be able to see this guy at full strength, because the conversations that were happening after the Whittaker fight got canceled were like, will we ever get to, is this going to become a what could have been conversation? Are we never going to see this guy at full strength? So I certainly want to see him at full strength, because I think this guy, has potential to be a champion and to be one of the best fighters in the UFC. But he is fighting one of the best fighters in the UFC and a former champion himself in Robert Whittaker. Here's another prediction for you guys. It's very clear the UFC doesn't like Sean Strickland, right? That's not breaking news to anyone. So after Whittaker beat Ankalaev, he was calling for the Strickland fight. All us MMA fans were calling for the Sean Strickland fight, right? A clear number one contender fight. They could put that on the same, or it might have been a little too close to the Izzy DDP fight, but you could make that very soon. You could make that a clear number one contender fight. Maybe that could have been on this Abu Dhabi card. Strickland said, I want no part of it. I'm waiting around for the title. I deserve it. I beat Izzy. I beat DDP questionably, but he was saying, I don't need to fight again. I just beat Costa, who is a guy ranked below me. I should be fighting for the belt now. They're giving Izzy the shot, so I'm next, right? Again, we've seen this story one too many times. If you're trying to call the shots, that's not really how it works, right? Dana's the boss, and he does not seem to like Sean Strickland. So I could see this fight being for the number one contender, man. Obviously, they love Khamzat. They want to push Khamzat. And if Whittaker wins, it's hard to deny him. So I think it's an easier sell to, Strickland versus DDP, the rematch, or Izzy versus Strickland. I know, again, another rematch. If Izzy wins the belt, I think he's going to want to fight Sean Strickland again. But I don't know. I just have a feeling that they're making this fight as a number one contender fight. Like I said, Strickland has made it very, very clear he is not fighting again. He deserves a title shot. Will that actually happen? I don't know. But I could see Khamzat versus Rob Whittaker for the number one contender, and another super interesting fight. Ciryl Gane versus Volkov. We saw Gane get offered the interim title fight versus Tom Aspinall, a fight that I think we all want to see. So, again, I know he was recording a movie, but this is pretty soon after. So, again, they wrapped up production. The guy can get his Oscar, and now maybe he can put his gloves back on and try to win a fight finally. Or, he does win a lot of fights, but he doesn't fight very frequently anymore. I think he's a much better fighter than Volkov. I think Volkov, tipped the cap to him, the improvements he's made this late in his career, but will it be enough? I just don't think that much has changed since the first time these guys have fought, right? Ciryl Gane is still that high level. Volkov's looked great recently. He looked great. I mean, he was a big underdog versus Sergey Pavlovich, and he jabbed his face off for 3 rounds, a clear decision victory there. But I don't know. I don't think he's got enough to beat Ciryl Gane. Magomed Ankalaev versus Rakic. I'm telling you guys, man, Rakic is an absolute dog. I think he has a real chance in this fight. I think the stand-up, I think he's going to be the faster guy. It'll be interesting. 2 guys who have great kicks, especially for, the big boys in the 205-pound division. You don't see a lot of 2 very athletic guys for this weight class, for this division, and 2 big guys as well. So this is a very fun, interesting matchup. I say fun. I could see it being a little bit of a snooze fest. We've seen both of these guys in some boring fights over the course of their UFC career, but I hope they come out and throw down. Again, the version of Alexander Rakic that fought at UFC 300, that fought Yuri, that was the best version we ever saw of him. And he's still young. Again, he's had injuries. He's had some unfortunate things in his career, but I'm very happy to see him right back in there, not taking that much damage in that fight. Again, they clearly don't like Ankalaev, right? They're giving him Rakic, who, when was it the last time Alexander Rakic won a fight? I don't even know. Rakic hasn't won a fight since March of 21 versus Thiago Santos. Before that, it was August 2020 versus on paper Anthony Smith. So it is a little bit interesting that they're giving him this fight, but I am not complaining. I am a big Rakic supporter, and I really hope he wins this fight. But again, it's hard to even call this one a number 1 contender fight. If you're Magomed Ankalaev, it's a little bit interesting that you're taking this. You kept all you're calling for is a title shot. The people who don't like Ankalaev are saying, well, you don't really deserve it over a win versus Johnny Walker. What are they going to say now? If he goes out and beats Rakic on a 2-fight skid, a guy who hasn't had a win in over 3 years, people are just going to keep saying the same thing. You're going to say you need one more fight. You still don't deserve it. So, again, interesting that he takes this fight, but I don't think he probably had no other choice. So, as intriguing of a matchup as this is, I believe it says a lot more about what else is going on with Alex Pereira. It seems this might have confirmed a move to heavyweight. There is no one else. If you weren't going to give him Ankalaev, who else could you possibly give him at 205, right? There is nothing for him right now. Ankalaev was the only worthy contender. And, now they just booked him in October. Alex said he wants to fight before the end of the year. So Ankalaev will definitely not be ready for, a November. My official prediction, Alex Pereira versus Tom Aspinall for the interim, quote unquote, real UFC heavyweight championship. Co-headliner for the bum John Jones and old man Stipe in November at MSG. UFC 308. Very excited for that one. But that's what I think is going to happen these next couple months. And what I will say, UFC 307, they're kind of just skipping over that one in Salt Lake City. Originally, when McGregor and Chandler got canceled, they said that's where that fight was going to end up. I think we all knew that fucking McGregor was not going to fight in Salt Lake City. So obviously that fight is not going to happen there. But it's interesting to see them announce all these fights on UFC 308 when UFC 307 still doesn't have a main event to my knowledge. I know Juliana Pena's fighting. I know Kayla Harrison's fighting, but fuck. If they're going to do a women's main event, I guess Salt Lake City would be the place for it. But UFC 308, massive news coming.